Abe was just a little puppy. He had soft, golden brown fur and bright, curious eyes. He lived with his mother and brothers and sisters. Life was simple, warm, and happy. Abe loved to snuggle close to his mother. Her fur was soft and warm, like a cozy blanket on a cold day. He liked the way she gently licked his ears and face. It made him feel safe. When he was scared or couldn't sleep, she would nuzzle him until he felt better. Abe's brothers and sisters were fun too. They would play all the time. They would chase each other, tumble around, and bite each other's tails. At night, they all slept close together. It was warm and peaceful. The soft breathing of his family was like a calm song. Everything felt perfect. Abe didn't worry about anything. Food was always there. Love was always there. His mother's eyes told him, "You are safe. You are loved." But one day, everything changed. Abe was napping near his mother when strange hands grabbed him. He woke up and yelped in surprise. The hands were strong. They lifted him away from his family. His mother barked loudly, but the hands didn't stop. Abe tried to wriggle free, but it didn't help. He looked around for his brothers and sisters, but they were too far now. He couldn't reach them. Abe's heart raced. He cried out for his mother, but she couldn't reach him either. The hands carried him to a cold, metal box. It smelled strange, nothing like home. The box had cold, hard walls. It wasn't warm or soft like his mother's fur. Abe whimpered as the door of the box closed. He was trapped. Abe didn't understand what was happening. He felt small and scared. The box moved, and he felt every bump. He cried, but no one came to comfort him. He missed his mother's gentle nuzzles. He missed the soft breathing of his siblings. He had never been alone before. After some time, the box stopped moving. The hands came back and carried him again. This time, they put him in a place with many other dogs. There were rows of cages, each with a dog inside. The place was loud and smelled bad. Dogs barked and howled. Abe's ears hurt from the noise. He wanted to cover them, but he couldn't. The floor of his new cage was cold metal. It felt nothing like the warm ground at home. Abe shivered. He looked around, hoping to find someone who could explain what was going on. But the other dogs looked just as scared and sad as he felt. Some had dull, tired eyes. Others barked and growled out of fear. Abe huddled in a corner of the cage. He didn't know what to do. His stomach ached, not just from hunger, but from sadness. He thought of his mother's soft fur. He thought of his brothers and sisters, their playful barks and happy tales. Would he ever see them again? Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Abe couldn't tell. Time felt strange here. Sometimes people walked by the cages. They didn't stop to pet him. They didn't speak kindly to him. Abe started to realize something. He wasn't going home. This was his life now. He felt a deep sadness that he had never known before. He had lost the only world he had ever known. He didn't understand why. What had he done wrong? Why was he here? The cold, the noise, the fear. They became his new reality. Abe curled up as small as he could, trying to hold on to the memory of his mother's warmth. But it was fading. He could still hear the howls and cries of the other dogs around him. Their sadness felt heavy, like a dark cloud hanging over the whole place. Abe didn't feel safe anymore. He didn't feel loved. He only felt lost. Abe lay on the cold metal floor of his cage. He was hungry, tired, and scared. The noise of barking dogs never stopped. He missed his mother. He missed the warmth of his brothers and sisters. He felt completely alone. Then one day, something changed. A man walked past the cages. He wasn't like the others. He didn't rush by without looking. He stopped in front of Abe's cage. The man had rough hands and a serious face, but he wasn't shouting like some of the shelter workers. Abe sat up, curious and hopeful. The man crouched down and stared at him for a long time. "You're a strong little guy," the man said. His voice was deep and rough, but not mean. Abe didn't understand the words, but the man didn't seem angry. Abe wagged his tail just a little. "Let's take this one," the man said to someone nearby. Before Abe knew what was happening, the cage door opened. A worker grabbed him by the neck, not too gently, and handed him to the man. Abe whined softly, but didn't struggle. He was just happy to be out of the cage. The man carried him outside. It was bright and sunny. Abe blinked in the light. He smelled fresh air for the first time in what felt like forever. The grass smelled wonderful, and the breeze felt nice on his fur. "Your name's Abe now," the man said as he put the puppy down on the ground. Abe didn't know what Abe meant, but the way the man said it felt like it was important. He tilted his head and wagged his tail again. They walked to a car. Abe hesitated for a moment. He remembered the last time he was put in a box and taken somewhere strange. But this time felt different. The man wasn't rushing. He opened the door and placed Abe gently on the seat. Abe sniffed the car nervously, but didn't make a sound. As the car started to move, Abe looked out the window. He saw trees, people, and houses. It was a new world. He wondered if this was going to be his new home. Was he finally going to be happy again? The car ride wasn't long. They stopped in front of a house with a small yard. The man got out and opened the door for Abe. "Come on, Abe," he said. Abe jumped out and sniffed the grass. It was soft under his paws. He felt excitement building inside him. There was space to run, and the house looked warm and safe. Maybe this was his new life. Maybe he had found a new family. The man led Abe inside. The house wasn't very big, but it was bigger than the cage. There was food and water in bowls near the door. Abe's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten much at the shelter. He ran to the bowls and started eating quickly. "Hey, slow down," the man barked. His voice was loud and sharp. Abe froze for a moment, unsure if he had done something wrong. But the man didn't hit him. He just walked away to another room. Abe sighed with relief and continued eating, more slowly this time. At first, things didn't seem so bad. The man gave Abe food every day and let him sleep in a corner of the living room. There was even a toy, a small rubber ball, that Abe liked to chew on. He thought maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to be happy again. But soon, things started to change. The man wasn't kind. His voice was often loud and angry. When Abe made small mistakes, like chewing on the wrong thing or barking too loudly, the man would yell and sometimes hit him. "Stupid dog," the man shouted once when Abe accidentally knocked over a chair. Abe cowered in fear. He didn't understand what he had done wrong. He only wanted to play. The man's hands were no longer gentle. When he grabbed Abe, it hurt. The house that once seemed safe now felt cold and scary. Abe tried to be good. He stayed quiet and obedient. He didn't chew on anything that wasn't his toy. He didn't bark unless he really needed to. But it didn't seem to matter. The man was always unhappy. Abe's hope slowly faded. He realized that this house wasn't the home he had dreamed of. The man wasn't like his mother. There was no warmth, no soft nuzzles, no gentle comfort. Abe longed for love, but it felt out of reach. He tried his best every day, hoping the man would notice and be kind. But kindness never came. Still, Abe didn't give up. Deep inside, he believed that maybe things could change. Maybe, if he was really good, the man would start to care for him. He clung to that hope, even though each day made it harder to believe. Abe curled up on the hard floor, his tail tucked between his legs. He tried to remember the warmth of his mother's fur, but it felt so far away now. His belly ached with hunger, and the bruises on his sides still hurt. The house that once felt like a fresh start had become a place of fear. His master had changed, or maybe Abe had just never truly known him. The man would shout over the smallest things. Sometimes Abe didn't even know what he had done wrong. If he barked too loudly, the man yelled. If Abe moved too slowly, he was kicked. The man's hands, once calm, were now rough and punishing. Abe tried his best to stay quiet, to stay out of the way, but it didn't seem to help. "Useless mutt," the man muttered one day after tossing a scrap of food at Abe. The piece was too small to satisfy his hunger, but Abe ate it quickly. He didn't know when his next meal would come. Days turned into weeks. The punishments became more frequent. The man rarely spoke kindly to Abe anymore. When he did speak, his voice was cold and sharp, like the edge of a knife. Abe spent most of his time hiding in corners, hoping to avoid trouble. He hardly played with his rubber ball anymore. One night, it was colder than usual. The man seemed especially angry after coming home late. His face was red, and his footsteps were loud and heavy. Abe stayed in the corner, his ears pinned back. He could feel something bad was coming. The man stomped over to Abe. "You're useless," You don't even bark when someone comes to the door," he growled. Without warning, the man grabbed Abe by the scruff of his neck and dragged him outside. Abe yelped and struggled, but the man didn't care. He threw Abe into the yard and slammed the door shut behind him. The cold air hit Abe like a slap. He whimpered and looked at the door, hoping the man would change his mind and let him back in. But the door stayed shut. Abe scratched at it for a while, but no one came. He wandered around the yard, shivering. The ground was hard and icy. There was no soft place to lie down. Abe found a small corner near the fence where the wind didn't hit him as much. He curled up, his tail tucked around his body, and tried to stay warm. His stomach growled again, but there was no food in sight. Abe didn't understand why his master was so angry all the time. What had he done wrong? He tried to be good. He tried to listen, but it never seemed to be enough. His heart ached, not just from fear, but from loneliness. He missed his mother. He missed the warmth of her fur. The next day, the man let him back inside, but only for a short time. Abe was given a small amount of food, and then he was locked in the yard again. This became a routine. Every day, Abe was forced to stay outside for hours, sometimes the whole night. He learned not to bark, even when he was freezing. It never made a difference. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. The man took Abe for a walk to a nearby park. It wasn't because the man cared. He just wanted to get out of the house. Abe didn't enjoy the walk like he used to. The leash was tied around his neck, and the man kept pulling harshly if Abe didn't move fast enough. At the park, Abe saw something that made his tail wag, just a little. A child was playing near the swings. The boy laughed and smiled as he ran around. He had bright, happy eyes and a soft voice. Abe watched him carefully. The boy noticed Abe and waved. "Hey, puppy," the boy called out, his voice full of kindness. Abe's ears perked up. It was the first time someone had spoken to him gently in a long time. For a brief moment, Abe felt hope again. Maybe this boy would be nice. Maybe he would pet Abe or play with him. But before Abe could move closer, the man yanked the leash hard. "Keep walking," he growled. Abe stumbled and almost fell. The boy's smile faded as the man pulled Abe away. Abe's heart sank. That small moment of kindness had been taken away so quickly. He didn't understand why. What had he done to deserve this life? The man led him back home, where Abe was locked outside again. That night, Abe lay on the cold, hard ground, staring up at the dark sky. He thought about the boy in the park. The boy's smile had been warm, like the sun. Abe wished he could see him again. Maybe the boy would save him. Maybe anyone would save him. But as the night grew colder, Abe's hope slowly faded once more. Abe closed his eyes, his small body shaking in the cold. The world felt dark and unforgiving, and he wondered if he would ever feel loved again. Abe's body ached from sleeping on the hard ground. His paws were sore from the cold, and his ribs stuck out from his thin frame. Each day felt the same, long and full of fear. The man only came outside to yell at him or throw scraps of food. Abe hardly dared to hope for anything anymore. But deep inside, he couldn't stop dreaming. He dreamed of warmth. He dreamed of gentle hands and a kind voice. Sometimes, he would close his eyes and imagine his mother's soft fur. He could almost feel her nuzzling him again. He imagined a place where he didn't have to be afraid. A place where he could play and run without being hurt. Every day, Abe watched the gate to the yard. It was always locked. He wondered what was beyond it. Was there a world where he could be free? He didn't know, but he wanted to find out. One afternoon, something unusual happened. The man left the gate open. Abe noticed it right away. His ears perked up and his heart raced. He stared at the open gate, hardly believing it. Was this his chance? Abe hesitated. Fear held him back. What if the man caught him? What if he got in trouble? But then he thought about the cold nights and the harsh punishments. He thought about how lonely he felt every single day. He couldn't live like this anymore. Abe took a deep breath and stepped forward. His paws shook as he moved closer to the gate. He kept looking over his shoulder, expecting the man to come out and stop him. But no one came. The house was silent. Slowly, Abe crossed through the gate. For the first time in a long time, he was outside the yard. The world beyond the fence felt big and strange. There were trees and bushes, and the air smelled fresh. Abe hesitated again, unsure of where to go. But something inside him told him to keep moving. He started to run. At first, his legs felt weak and wobbly. He wasn't used to running. But as he pushed himself forward, he felt a new kind of strength. The wind brushed through his fur, and for a moment, he felt free. Abe didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get away. Away from the shouting, the cold, and the fear. He ran past houses and empty streets. His paws hit the ground hard, but he didn't stop. His heart pounded in his chest. The world outside was both exciting and terrifying. Abe's nose twitched as he took in new smells, grass, flowers, and other animals. He heard birds chirping and the distant sound of cars. Everything was new, but he didn't have time to explore. He had to keep moving. The further he ran, the more his body began to protest. His legs ached, and his breath came in short, painful gasps. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The memory of his harsh life pushed him forward. He wanted something better, even if he didn't know what it was. After what felt like hours, Abe slowed down. His legs wobbled, and he almost collapsed. He found a patch of grass near a tree and lay down, panting heavily. His entire body hurt, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel trapped. Abe rested his head on his paws and looked around. He wasn't sure where he was, but it didn't matter. He had escaped. He was free. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. He couldn't go back. The sky above him was clear and blue. Abe watched the clouds slowly drift by. He felt a tiny spark of hope deep in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a better life waiting for him out here. He didn't know how long it would take, but he was determined to find it. Abe lay under the tree, his body completely exhausted. His legs felt heavy, and his paws throbbed. He had never run that far before. His breath came in short gasps, and he could barely lift his head. The grass beneath him was soft, but his aching body barely noticed. He felt dizzy and weak. For a moment, he thought about giving up. Maybe he had made a mistake by running away. Where could he go now? He didn't have a home. He didn't have anyone who cared about him. His heart sank as fear and sadness crept back in. The sun was warm on his fur, but it wasn't enough to comfort him. His stomach growled, reminding him of how long it had been since he last ate. He closed his eyes and whimpered softly. Was this the end of his journey? But then something happened. A shadow fell over him. Abe opened his eyes slowly. At first, he saw only a blurry figure standing above him. As his vision cleared, he saw a woman kneeling beside him. Her eyes were soft and kind. She had dark hair pulled back and wore a gentle smile. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered. Her voice was warm, like a gentle breeze. Abe flinched at first, expecting her to grab him roughly. But she didn't. Instead, she reached out slowly, giving him time to see that she meant no harm. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now." Abe's ears twitched. Safe? Could he trust her? He didn't move, too scared to take the chance. The woman noticed his fear and lowered her hand gently onto the grass beside him. "You look so tired," she said. "What happened to you?" Abe didn't understand the words, but her tone was different from anything he had heard in a long time. It wasn't angry or harsh. It was full of care. Slowly, Abe sniffed her hand. She smelled clean and comforting. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" The woman continued. She gently stroked his head, and Abe froze for a moment. Her touch was soft, like his mother's had been. He hadn't felt kindness like this in so long. His tense body began to relax. The woman noticed how thin and weak he was. "You need food," she said with concern, "and some rest." She gently slid her arms under him. Abe whimpered softly, but didn't resist. Her touch didn't hurt like the man's had. She lifted him with care, holding him close to her chest. "It's okay," she whispered again, her voice soothing. "I'll take care of you." Abe rested his head against her shoulder. For the first time in a long time, he felt safe. He didn't know where she was taking him, but something deep inside told him to trust her. The woman carried him to her car. She opened the door and carefully placed him on a soft blanket on the back seat. Abe curled up, his body still trembling from exhaustion. The car started, but this time, Abe didn't feel afraid. He looked up at the woman, who glanced back at him with a reassuring smile. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. The car ride wasn't long. Soon, they arrived at a small house with a garden full of colorful flowers. The woman parked the car and gently picked Abe up again. He was too weak to stand on his own. She brought him inside the house and placed him on a large, cushioned bed near the living room. Abe's eyes widened. He had never seen a bed like this before. It was soft and warm, much better than the cold floor he was used to. "Let's get you some food," the woman said as she walked to the kitchen. Abe watched her, his tail wagging just a little for the first time in weeks. She returned with a bowl of warm food and placed it in front of him. Abe sniffed it cautiously. The smell was delicious. He began to eat slowly at first, but soon his hunger took over. He finished the bowl quickly. "Poor thing," the woman said with a gentle laugh. "You were starving." After eating, Abe felt a little stronger. The woman sat beside him and gently stroked his fur. "You don't have to be scared anymore," she said softly. "You're safe here." Abe didn't understand all of her words, but he felt their meaning. He rested his head on her lap, feeling her warmth. His body began to relax completely for the first time in a long time. The days that followed were full of kindness. The woman, whom Abe began to see as his new friend, gave him food, warm blankets, and gentle care. She cleaned his wounds and spoke to him softly every day. Abe started to heal, both inside and out. His fear began to fade. He no longer flinched at every sound or sudden movement. The woman's home became a place of peace and comfort. One evening, Abe lay on the soft bed by the fireplace, his belly full and his body warm. The woman sat nearby, reading a book. Abe watched her with grateful eyes. He didn't know what the future held, but for now he was safe. For now he was loved. Abe closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the woman's presence fill him with a new hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, he had found his true home. Abe stretched his legs as he lay on the soft bed near the fireplace. The warmth of the fire relaxed his tired body, but deep inside, he was still learning to feel safe. His new life was peaceful, but the memories of his past were hard to forget. Sometimes, in his dreams, he still heard the man's angry voice. He would wake up shaking, his heart pounding in fear. But every time that happened, the woman was there. She would kneel beside him and gently stroke his head. "You're safe now," she would whisper softly. "No one will hurt you anymore." Her voice calmed him, and he slowly began to trust her more each day. The days passed quietly. The woman gave him regular meals and fresh water. She took him on walks through the garden and talked to him in a soothing voice. Abe didn't understand all her words, but he felt the kindness in them. She never shouted or raised her hand to him. In the days that followed, Abe continued to heal. He started greeting visitors at the door with wagging tails instead of hiding in fear. He lay by the woman's feet in the evenings while she read or watched TV. When she scratched behind his ears, he would close his eyes and sigh with contentment. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were less frequent now. When they did, Abe would wake up shaking, but he knew he wasn't alone. The woman would always be there to comfort him. "You've come so far," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. She gently stroked his head, and Abe rested his chin on her lap. He didn't fully understand her words, but he felt their meaning in the way she touched him and spoke to him. Abe's once timid nature had slowly transformed. He was more confident now. He played without fear. He greeted the world with curiosity instead of fear. Yet he knew his journey wasn't over. There were still moments when the shadows of the past crept in, but he was learning how to face them. As the fire crackled softly in the background, Abe felt a deep sense of peace. He was no longer the frightened puppy who had been abandoned and mistreated. He was loved. He was cherished. The woman smiled down at him, her eyes full of warmth. "You're home now, Abe. You'll never have to be alone again," she said softly. Abe wagged his tail and licked her hand gently. He understood that this was his new life, one filled with love and safety.